And there's lots to talk about this morning, not least that terrible shooting in America, the Prince Harry visit. But I think we're going to have to start with what was yesterday morning's breaking news, the interview Peter Mandelson did on the Sun TV channel, trying to get ahead of these emails. As they emerged yesterday, Kemi Badenoch put the Prime Minister under great pressure at Prime Minister's questions. The papers all now say teetering on the brink. I mean, what do you think is in the mind this morning of Keir Starmer with the Trump visit coming up in the next few days? Peter Mandelson, these emails are toe-curlingly excruciating, aren't they? What's going to happen?
It's excruciating for the Prime Minister because, on the one hand, next week, if Peter Mandelson is still in place, the first question at every press conference, the whole area that will dominate debate is not the great tech deal that he hopes to talk about, it's not whether or not tariffs can be lowered, it's the fate of Peter Mandelson. Peter Mandelson is a news magnate, and his relationship with Epstein, given the tone, the nature, the language, the intensity of the friendship, means that it is inescapable.
I think the world of you, and I feel hopeless and furious about what has happened. This is Peter Mandelson emailing Lord Jeffrey Epstein after he's been convicted of child sex offenders.
Well, quite. I mean, but on the other hand, in Keir Starmer's mind, he will think, if I get rid of Peter Mandelson because he was too close to Epstein, am I powering the story in America? Am I saying that proximity to Epstein means that you can't hold public office? Does that mean that I'm criticising Trump as well?
Who's due for a visit?
Exactly. And more than that, Starmer's own judgment is called into question. Why did you appoint this guy? Very controversial. And on top of that, before this scandal broke, the general consensus was that Peter Mandelson was actually doing a very good job, that he was managing to straddle both relations with Trump and closeness to a Labour Prime Minister.
An elegant description of the dilemma, Lord Gove. But what do you actually do if you're Keir Starmer this morning? Do you try and front this out for the next 5 days, or do you just say to Peter, look, frankly, this is irrecoverable and you've got to do the decent thing? What do you do?
Well, the pattern of behaviour from Keir Starmer so far suggests that he probably will sack Peter Mandelson, because whether or not you think it's good politics or poor friendship, Keir Starmer has shown that when push comes to shove, he will slot even his closest friends in order to consolidate his own and, to be fair, the Labour Party's political position.
Are we absolutely convinced, both of you, that nobody believes Lord Mandelson's comments that he regrets ever having contact with? I think he described it as like having something on his shoe. He was totally duped by the lies. And he has a history of talking to people that cause offence to others in order to broker deals. I mean, there was lots of conversations that took place in the lead-up to the Good Friday Agreement where people were talking to people who others would have been very horrified, which led to peace. So are we convinced now that this is just awful, 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 or is there any belief that politics is a mucky business?
Politics is a mucky business, but the key thing... Actually, you do know better than most or so. But the key thing...
And we all believe Peter's deep regret, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
He will be beside himself.
I think it presents that this was very predictable, that this was going to happen, that it was very foreseeable that Peter Mandelson, given his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, would be unlikely to actually hold a senior-level role in the City of London. The CEO of Barclays, for example, was fired for that very purpose, actually for not disclosing the personal nature of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein.
And his emails with Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, exactly. So it presents a So it was very, very foreseeable. But the question it begs to me is, why is Keir Starmer still continuing this farce? Because
I think it's the most recent indication of the support came out after PMQs, didn't it?
But even then,
it was more historic before that?
No, far from it. Even then, too, from the beginning, I think that the relationship between Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein or so was something that should have just let... I get it. Peter Mandelson is really good at what he does, and he does bring people together who probably wouldn't actually want to speak to each other. He is doing a good job as our diplomat, as our man in America. The problem is that this is just far too much baggage. And also, you have to remember, look at everything that's involved here. Child abuse on a mass industrialised scale. On an industrialised scale, the trafficking of children. You've got pretty much a heiress of sort or so. It's sat down in the American jail. It's damaged. It's hurt the reputation of the royal family via Prince Andrew, amongst other things too. So to then bring it into the state, it begs the question: why would you make that decision? It's very predictable.
Well,
this is how this
should
is
we
going to
see
end.
what the Prime Minister actually said in PQs yesterday? Because he was pretty robust in defence.
The ambassador has repeatedly expressed his deep regret for his association with him. He's right to do so. I have confidence in him, and he's playing an important role in the UK-US relationship.
The thing is, though, the way politics works is you have to be robust until you can't be robust anymore. And what they can't do, Keir Starmer can't say, well, you know, complicated this on the one hand or on the other. So they have to stick with this line. But, I mean, behind the scenes, the conversations will be, is it possible to get through this, and how much damage do we do? And don't you think that at the moment there's lots of people holding back who could come out and say more critical things? I mean, do you read another one? This is Peter to Jeffrey Epstein. I can still barely understand it, he writes in an email. It just could not happen in Britain. You have to be incredibly resilient, fight for early release, and be philosophical about it as much as you can. I mean, the guy had just been convicted of child sex offenders, and apparently it couldn't happen in Britain. You've got to be philosophical, keep fighting. And, you know, in retrospect, I mean, look, Peter will be hugely upset, but you can't have those kind of emails in the public domain for your lead ambassador and brush it off.
Although Donald Trump is also, as you say, he's uncomfortable
with a direct
about
mandate from the people in an election, which Peter doesn't have.
Well, exactly. So you'll have Donald Trump, Keir Starmer and the King at a banquet next Wednesday. Every single one of them will have someone close to them, or in Donald Trump's case, himself, who's caught up in the Epstein scandal. So the King's own brother has now left public life, Andrew, because of the Epstein scandal. And Keir Starmer will know, as he's sitting down to his 5-course banquet, that the next day he's going to face the nation's press for an hour with Donald Trump, with this top of mind for everyone. Now, it's entirely possible, to be fair to Peter Mandelson, that at the time he said that, he thought that Epstein was innocent.
Of course.
A number of people did at that time. And after that offence, after he'd served time, Epstein then went on to play a role in business. We know that from the emails that have been emerging. And as Nels pointed out, Epstein was advising, big banks, Morgan Stanley, one of the sort of biggest American banks, in the world. So it wasn't as though he was a pariah in most people's eyes at that time. But of all people, Peter Mandelson knows politics. And I'm sure he will be in agonies at the moment. I know him personally, as you do, Ed. I'm a member of an exclusive one-man club, which is Tories for Mandelson. I actually like and rate him, and that is why I feel human sympathy for him. But the political optics of this are terrible.
But you didn't really quite answer my question. In the end, what would you do if you were in Keir Starmer's position? Would you decide that the damage to the American relationship and the risk to the American relationship of getting rid of him means it's worth fronting this through? Or would you say, frankly, this isn't going to last, and therefore let's get it done now, ask Peter to resign, so that by next week we can attempt to move on? I
think it's a knife-edge thing, and it's made worse for Keir Starmer by the fact, of course, that we had Angela Rayner's resignation last week. If he was in a stronger political position, it might be easier to weather it. But it may well be the case that he will think, when will this assault end? I've got to try to draw a line under this and change the conversation. So I think on that basis, I think odds on he will, Keir Starmer will sack Peter.
And should? What do you think?
Well, if I were there, I would say that the conversation that needs to be had, and I hope it has been had, is one in which an exhaustive account from Peter Mandelson of everything he did and said, and an explanation is given. And if you can mount a defence on the basis that he sincerely believed, and that the evidence would have led him to believe, that Epstein was innocent at that time, then make that defence. But look at the argument, and if you can't make that defence with conviction, in a way that would persuade an honest and fair-minded person, then I fear.
I think he's toast, essentially. Peter Mandelson is completely untenable. That if you look at what's happening in broader society, right, there's actually something that was said in the email that this could not happen in Britain. And the question is, what did he mean by that? Because, again, there's so much baggage that comes from that sort of situation. Does he mean that high-profile people such as a Jimmy Savile who get away with these sorts of situations? So it begs a lot of questions.
I think he meant that a conspiracy to take down somebody who was actually innocent in a political attack. I mean, it wasn't Peter...
The problem that OK, fair enough, I'll take that at face value. We could take that at face value. But the key thing here, once again, too, is that Peter Mandelson is in a situation right now that when you look at it from a global perspective, the name Jeffrey Epstein is completely notorious. He shouldn't have been appointed in the first place on that basis, sadly. So, please...
How does it affect Keir Starmer, where there have been many conversations with many problems? My goodness, they've come at the Prime Minister since election, hard and fast, haven't they? Is this one of the straws that could break him? Do you think it jeopardises him?
I think he'll survive this. I don't know. I don't understand why he didn't just fire him before PMQs yesterday, because effectively what would have happened is that Kemi Badenoch had her best day ever, pretty much. Kemi Badenoch's pretty much lifeless at this particular moment. He registered a blip on her radar. That's good for her. But the key thing, good for her, perhaps bad for the Conservative Party in the long term. But the key thing here is that. Will it actually damage Keir Starmer? I think that it's already damaging him. He shouldn't be spending this political capital needlessly.
Yeah.
Political capital that he doesn't actually have. He could have fired him before PMQs. Ken Bott would have stuck with what she does, which is just stick to the questions that she normally asks or so, and embarrass herself. But he gave her best day.
Shall we? Sorry.
This is not the first time a Prime Minister sitting in Downing Street is worried about whether it was right to sack Peter Mandelson, and they will be so kind of burdened by history. We should move on, because I think we should talk about.
Shall we talk about Charlie Kirk, who I think for a lot of people in the UK wouldn't have been particularly aware of. A lot of younger people were, actually.
Should have been, actually. Should have been.
A lot of younger people were. My daughter, for instance, very aware of him, very aware of some of the debates he does online and all of that, but weren't aware of him. Now, oh, my goodness, this political assassination has sent shockwaves, not the first assassination attempt or assassination success we've seen, a political assassination in America in recent months, but, I mean, absolutely devastating, not least for his two children, you know, very young, 3 and 1, and the family all around. But for everybody there, and because of the figure he was politically.
Would you like to take that first? Or?
Well, absolutely. So, you know, he was a sort of Cicero for the TikTok age. I mean, he was someone who deliberately set out to go on to debate on campuses and elsewhere in order to carry the MAGA message, in order to carry the Trump gospel. He was an evangelical Christian, a convinced conservative, and actually a very attractive speaker who had been very successful in motivating younger voters to consider and, in some cases, vote for Trump. And there was evidence that he'd helped to move the youth vote towards Trump. And his assassination is simply the latest, and this is the tragedy, the latest apparently politically motivated assassination, or certainly assassination of people involved in politics, to afflict America at this time. So Trump himself, of course, when he was in Pennsylvania, was the victim of assassination attempt. And it was the case that an American politician in Minnesota, the Midwestern state, was also killed earlier this summer.
Can I just say something? I don't agree he was a Cicero for the TikTok age. I believe he was a David Duke for the TikTok age. And I have some degree...
Can you just remind us who David Duke
was? The former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. This was a very seriously deep... Now, this is by no means trying to justify his murder. Political violence is wrong at home. It is wrong abroad. It is wrong... and it's also wrong. Political violence must be condemned, as must be the propagandizing for political violence and the dehumanization of people. Charlie Kirk was somebody who was... I shiver, particularly for conservatives, when he's described as a conservative, because he wasn't a conservative by any means whatsoever. He was quite clearly, comfortably, a supremacist. That if I was somebody who was going on television, I'm sure you wouldn't describe somebody who goes on TV and blames Jewish people for what he describes as the coarsening of Western culture, says things like the Equality Act or the Civil Rights Act or so was a mistake, says things like women shouldn't be entitled to abortions, etc., so on and so forth.
Very extreme things. I want you to carry on.
Please.
But he said those in a debate in a university and then received, you know, very vigorous debate back. So what he would argue and his supporters is that is freedom of speech. He was wearing a T-shirt with freedom on it, which we hate when it's stopped in this country.
No, I agree with that. I am not here to justify or even contextualise his murder. I completely abhor political violence. I completely despise guns and gun violence too, whatsoever. He was outright on camera saying that, look, it's worthy of us, for the purpose of the Second Amendment or so, that a few people being murdered by guns or so, being murdered with guns or so over the course of the year is a worthy sacrifice for the Second Amendment. The problem is that whilst those of us who speak from the position of empathy, where we come from, is the belief that it could be us one day. He never thought that it could be him, and he thought he was somewhat invincible, and sadly, it happened to him. And sadly, the very sort of people he's helped dehumanize or so, the minorities, the women, the Jewish people, so on and so forth, and now the exact same thing that he almost helped to legitimize for them has happened to him. It's sad, it's wrong, but he too, there's a moral lesson in here too, which is recognise your own vulnerability. Be more empathetic. Don't dehumanize people. Don't propagandize for people's murder. It could happen to you.
But isn't the striking thing? So look, whatever you think of his views, of course, it is terrible that he shot in cold blood. However, the state of America today is revealed not just by the shooting but by the aftermath. When Donald Trump had an attempted assassination, that was roundly condemned by Democrats and Republicans from all sides. In this case, we saw last night in Congress, when they were attempting a period of silence, shouting and rowing in Congress. I
think we can see a little bit of it.
Can we see a little bit of what...
Yes, please.
I'm not sure whether we'll hear the audio, but there's shouting and interruptions during this period of silence. And then what happens is, from both sides, people say this is politics. It's the Democrats doing this. Or Democrats saying, you know, it's the consequence of your views. So the reaction to it is divisive and polarising and politicized in a way that I don't think I've seen in response to a shooting like this before. It tells you.
And I think in
what purpose does the gentlelady from Colorado rise?
Yeah, no, I think that was them trying to get them to be quiet at that point.
I mean, it is. The reaction to it tells us something about America.
Yes, you did not have a reaction like this when JFK or RFK was shot, or when there was a murder attempt on Ronald Reagan.
Or don't agree with Donald Trump.
Exactly. No. And I think that there was a terrible moment where there was a young man in the US who deliberately set out to politically assassinate someone who was involved in private healthcare in America a while ago. And as a handsome and apparently motivated by political ideology, articulate young man, he's become a poster boy for some. And you have this terrible situation now where someone who killed for politically motivated reasons...
Which is wrong.
Totally wrong. Evil. Has become for some a perverse figure to admire, and it is a reflection of how American politics has become polarised, and it is a reflection of deeper currents, whereby when something like this happens, one side grieves, and then the other side not only doesn't express sympathy, but sometimes says, well, actually, it was your rhetoric that was responsible.
Well, it's Donald Trump. Donald Trump himself said for too long, far sort of left-wing rhetoric has pervaded, and well, you know, some would argue that it's also the far right-wing that's caused it on both sides.
You should not attempt to politicise something like this on either side.
Agreed.
So,
Dame Andrea Jenkins, the Reform Mayor for Lincolnshire here in the UK, her first response is, the left is vile.
Gosh.
Long live centre-right truth-telling. Never be silenced, R.I.P. Charlie Kirk.
But we just don't know at this stage who the killer was or what their motivation was.
But immediately to politicise it, it's so dangerous.
Can I point something out? Just to give you a bit of... two things I want to point out. Number one, Keir Starmer has been largely silent on racial violence and political violence that's been taking place in this country. He has not done anywhere near enough to condemn it, that we've seen serious stuff happening to people up and down the country for quite a while now, particularly over the summer. He has not shown anywhere near enough leadership on it. And it was very surprising to see him come out and make a statement against what went on in America yesterday. But I became intimately familiar with Charlie Kirk and his work due to the fact that young people, and I must be very clear, young black people had approached me looking for help in trying to see how they could get out of their clutches. So I'm not going to name any names or so because they've disappeared from public life. What was happening is that you were finding traumatised young people or so. There was... Actually, I'm not going to give any description because I don't want you to know who I'm speaking of. But she was a famous figure who you don't hear of anymore right now. She was actually taken. She was traumatised as a young 18-year-old in a university campus, writing blogs and everything else. So before you know it, she was actually tapped up. She received an email by Turning Point, which wanted to set up in the UK.
That was his non-profit organisation, wasn't it?
They took her from being this anonymous young lady to being something of a juggernaut in British media, to effectively where she became a parrot for far-right talking points, and to the point where a British newspaper was paying her to not write articles that were effectively far-right in nature, but to be the face of articles written by much older white men, some of them with dodgy sympathies or so, which I would probably describe as far-right, but to be the face of them. So I must be very, very clear. This was unbelievable, serious, almost like the far-right as a business model.
And I'm sure...
Even with that, it doesn't mean that Charlie Kirk should have been murdered. I don't agree with that in the slightest.
Look, I'm sure we're going to discuss this more, and again, all our sympathies have got to go to his family on a personal level.
And the people he dehumanised too, and the people whose murders he propagandised for and dehumanised too. Our sympathies go to them too. Yep.
After division and collapse, shall we look at a possible building of a bridge?
Yes.
Harry and the King met for the first time in 19 months for about 55 minutes. I think Harry then whizzed off to do something for the Invictus Games, and Charles went to deal with whatever he had to deal with.
But brother William was busy elsewhere.
I think later he was asked, how's your dad? And he said he's great. And that's the first sort of flicker of hope.
Magnificent news. Magnificent news. Families fight and families reunite is the nature of it. I think all of us around this table here are parents. And we're very lucky to be in that situation. We're estranged with our children. So the last thing we would want is for us to continuously, for our relationship with our children to become tabloid fodder and people are making money out of it. To be close to your child, particularly in your golden years, whether you're a king or a pauper, whoever else you might be or so, everybody, to have children is a blessing, and to families fight, but to reunite with your child, to get close to your child again is such a great thing. And I think it's a good thing for the nation too.
Perhaps this is the great reconciliation. Perhaps they got through 50 minutes in a meeting in which they,
maybe they met for the 55
Maybe
minutes.
they did, but William wasn't there. The brothers aren't reconciled.
One step at a time.
What do you think? Is it the great moment?
This is a rare, arguably unique occasion where I can endorse 100% and unhesitatingly everything that Nelson said.
Right.
Let's see how things go. It has been fashionable in the past to knock Harry for the choices that he's made, but actually, I think overall, whatever you think of each individual member of the royal family, they live lives of service, and Harry's been criticised uphill and down dale. But he's still stayed true to helping veterans who have lost limbs and who have suffered in battle. And the fact that he and his father are reconciled just on a human level, exactly as Nell says, that's a good thing.
OK.
Very, very good.
Well, later in the programme, we're debating whether it's time for William to forgive now. Would you think that's it?
Or for Harry to forgive them too, because forgiveness is a two-way street. It doesn't mean because you're more senior in the hierarchy that you're the person who's forgiving. What's right is right, what's wrong is wrong. Prince Harry revealed things that were very intimate to him, also about his wife, about his children, etc., so on and so forth. But look, the key thing about it is that...
I think William won't see it that way.
No, but then Harry might not see it that way too. But the key thing about it, you take one step towards somebody, they take two towards you. That's how forgiveness works. It's a beautiful thing. Let's do it. It's a good thing for all of us.
Really? Oh, my goodness. Look at that.
I think we need to see how this all plays out.